It's all about global citizenship. It's about getting everybody together.
This week, my guest is my very good friend, I'm pleased to say, and colleague, I'm also pleased to say, Nabuti Mwemwenikarawa. And Nabuti is the executive director of the Phoenix Islands Protected Area Trust, which is, to me, the most important title that you have. However, when you refer to people, you always go back to their highest title that they've had in their lives, and they are allowed to be addressed as that. And yours is minister. You were elected member of parliament and were the finance minister for the country of Kiribati, which is the largest atoll nation on the planet. And you're a tremendous political background and leader, and now you're one of the pillars of civil society in Kiribati, and it's so great to have you this week on the show.
Thank you very much. It's certainly great to be here too, Greg.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you. You always give me a big smile when I'm with you, and you're here visiting me in LA, which is a little unusual. Usually I see you on your home island or islands of Kiribati, and I think our listeners would probably like to know a little bit about the country of Kiribati. It's the largest atoll nation in the world. It straddles the equator, and it starts in the west in the Gilbert Islands, and then it stretches through the center in the Phoenix Islands, and it goes all the way to the Line Islands in the east. Now, it's gigantic. I mean, you go from one end to the country to the other, it's like going from New York to Los Angeles. And the area of ocean that this nation controls is over 3 million square kilometers, which is, it's like 3/4 the size of the continental United States. And there's 120,000 people there. To me, it's the most important, relatively unknown nation on the planet.
Yes.
What does the ocean mean to people of Kiribati?
Well, the ocean is actually everything for us. Because when you're actually living on the land, you look this side, you'll see the sea. You look on the other side, it's the sea. It's the sea around you all the time. So most of our life is about the sea rather than the land.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's walk our listeners through exactly what the islands are like, because they're atolls. If you walk from one side of the island to the other, how wide is it? How long does it take you?
Well, let me describe it this way.
Yeah.
If you were playing tennis on the island, and you have the lagoon side here and the ocean side at the other end of the tennis court, you risk losing the tennis ball in the sea.
I love the sort of geomorphology of atolls. They're generally round. It'll take you quite a while to drive around the island, but it'll take you just minutes to drive from the ocean to the lagoon. So there's generally a lagoon in the middle, then there's a strip of land surrounding the lagoon. And your nation, your history, your culture, your people have been there for thousands of years, right? Do you have any idea how long the ancestry goes back on these islands?
Well, when we trace our lineage and we go back to as far as somebody not human, so we go back to the original creator. So that's how
I
far
want to hear
we
more
go,
about that. I want to hear more about that.
So we don't know. How many, several thousand years, perhaps?
Yeah.
When we lose memory of how we came about. So,
that's wonderful having those kind of roots. It's I think, the term is indigenous culture.
That's right.
And I'm a bit envious of it because I come from a transplanted culture, but yours is truly of that place, of that area for many thousands of years. I actually think the anthropological evidence goes back some 10 or 15,000 years. It's interesting what you said, that it goes back to the you said human phase. And I'm wondering, are there like gods about the ocean or spirits about the ocean? I mean, what's the cultural belief system in Kiribati? If you could just tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, let me take you to the typical village.
Yeah.
And still...
That's great. Give me a village tour.
Typical village.
Yeah.
And we have this meeting place, a very important meeting place, which is called the Manyapa.
Okay.
It's like a meeting hall with no wall. And that Manyapa, on the western side, will be the position for the visitors. And we call that side the sharks section of the Manyapa. And on the eastern side, which is on the land side of the Manyapa, is the Tapake. Okay. Tapake is like the guy who lives on land. So we were always a shark, and we're also somebody from the land.
Okay.
So that's what it is like. Yeah.
Oh.
So we're from the ocean.
I've heard Kiribati described as a Maniaba culture, is a term that I've heard. Can you tell me what that means?
It symbolizes the community, how the community is set up. The most important place to where you find people, how they are organized, and where the society is actually also controlled and organized in terms of if they have problems, they will take it to the Maniapa, it will be settled there. Mind you, though, we don't vote. It's always based on consensus. So they will wait until everybody agrees.
What a great way to be. Yeah, these maniabas, I guess we'd call them a meeting house or a central public building, let's say. However, these are of designs thousands of years old, and I'm always impressed by them. They're perfectly designed for that habitat because they've got a high ceiling, which draws the heat up, right? So they're sort of natural air conditioning. And then the beautiful tropical equatorial breezes come through and cool you off.
Yes.
And then, of course, the roof keeps the rain off should there be any rain. But the cultural sort of social importance of the Maniaba has always impressed me, too. And no one can be turned away, I've heard, from a Maniaba. Is that right?
The name of the place, which is Maniaba, means like welcoming everybody and accepting everybody. That's
wonderful.
That's the meaning, the literal meaning of the word Maniaba.
So if somebody in the village is down on their luck and doesn't have income or food, can they go to the Maniaba?
They can go to the Maniaba.
They'll get shelter, they'll get food. And I know as a visitor, I'm always treated just wonderful inside the Maniaba, and it's a really wonderful culture. And then I've also heard that there's, your ancestors have developed incredible navigation techniques to get across the ocean.
Yeah.
Your ancestors ruled the seas essentially thousands of years ago before Europeans figured out how to put a sail on a boat. Your ancestors were navigating many thousands of miles across the ocean, and I've heard that the construction of the Maniaba somehow has some of that information encoded in it. Is that right?
I'm not quite sure about that one.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm not quite sure about the navigational value of the Maniaba.
Yeah.
But it's certainly, the skill is available there.
Yeah.
It certainly belongs to certain families. But that has been kept over the years, and you inherit it because it's your family's skill. So
I see. Oh, so if your family has the skill set to build a Maniaba, you kind of inherit that.
Yeah.
I see. That's amazing. Another Kiribati friend of mine once said to me, the ocean is where we belong. It's where we're most comfortable. We just use islands to park our canoes at night. And you really do have an amazing boat building and sailing culture as well. I've heard you've got the fastest canoes in the Pacific. Is that true?
Yep, they are canoes with the outriggers, and these are pretty fast. But very difficult to also handle. Yeah? So you've got to be very skilled. Yeah? How it is built is also very, it takes a lot of skill.
Kind of like the Maniaba, it's got a construction.
And sailing it also, because it's not like you can sail straight into the wind and turn a 360 around degree. Okay. You have to be able also to move the sail from one end to the other without dropping it, and then sailing back into.
Okay, all right.
So,
current political structures in the Pacific have, 17 nations, 16, 17 nations in the Pacific. Is that about right? Kiribati is one of them. One of the Pacific Island nations is what referred to. Tell me about your neighbors, just to orient our viewers, our listeners, as to where you are in the Pacific.
Well, we have the closest neighbors would be like the Marshall Islands, and that would be the north. And, of course, we have the Tuvalu, also towards the south and the west. Yeah, those would be the closest ones. And Fiji is quite a distance away, but we're more associated with the Micronesians. Nauru's is.
Okay.
And the FSM and the Marshall Islands are more related to us. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at a map of the Pacific Ocean, I always like to say, right in the middle of the Pacific is Kiribati.
Yes.
And you actually occupy, what is it?
The 4 hemispheres.
All four hemispheres.
4 hemispheres.
And I think you're the only country in the world that does that, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. What I find so relevant and important about your country, Nabuti, right now is that in this age, we're finally understanding the value of the ocean. The United Nations has passed sustainable development goals around the ocean. The areas we're protecting have increased. We understand now that climate change is regulated primarily by the ocean. We also know that most of our oxygen is produced by the ocean. So I find society is now turning towards nations like yours for leadership. And Kiribati has shown tremendous leadership in the creation of the Phoenix Islands Protected Area. And I wondered if you could tell our listeners a little bit about that. What is it? What does it mean? And what is your job?
We have 3 island groups in Kiribati. So we have the Gilbert's group, and we have the Phoenix group and the Line group. The Phoenix group is comprised of 8 islands. And when you talk about the protected area, you're talking about an area about 408,000 square kilometers. That's the protected
That's about
area.
the size of California, just to orient.
And only one of those islands is currently inhabited, which is Canton, which is maybe you're talking about 40 inhabitants, residents. But they're not actually residents staying there forever. They are caretakers.
Okay.
So they change every so many years.
Okay. So it's an area of the ocean like the size of California with 8 islands, and there's 40 people that live there.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Now, I have to also, full disclosure, you and I have worked on this together, and I know the islands quite well, and you and I were just there on an expedition. And what do the Phoenix Islands provide the world in terms of values from your point of view?
Let us start with what actually happened in the beginning.
Okay.
It was a closure of the area to commercial fishing.
Yep.
And of course we can't fish. We can't have the fishermen from overseas, also the distant water fishing nations.
Right.
They can't take the tuna, and tuna is that's where our money is.
It's where most of your economy comes from.
Yeah, it's you're talking about finance for the whole government budget of about almost 90%.
Yeah,
of the budget.
And from being the finance minister, that's a tremendous sacrifice. Is to, or let's call it a risk, to most of your revenue to run the government, to pay for health care, education, all that comes from selling access to tuna to foreign nations. And Kiribati shut down an area the size of California from foreign fishing. Now, that's just an extraordinary thing, really. I can't think of another nation in the world that would dive into its most profitable activity and restrict it. So why did Kiribati do this? And what are the benefits to the nation, and what are the benefits to the world?
Well, it was quite we had some mixed understandings in the first place, but it was something that we had to offer. It was our gifts to humankind, but not most people understood at the time. I think there was also a perception that even though we would be having some sacrifice, that we would have also the corresponding commitments for those people in the global community who would be benefiting from the ecosystem services that the close PIPA would be providing.
Now, let's dive into that a little bit. Ecosystem services, that's kind of a big mouthful for some people, but what you mean by that is the health of the ocean, essentially.
Yes. Yeah.
And we talked earlier that the oceans provide all these things to the world, and the world has gotten a lot smaller, and I like to call the oceans the life support system of the planet. And we've been treating them pretty badly, by and large, globally. And here Kiribati has taken a very big chunk of the oceans and said that we're going to look after it, we're going to protect it, and you've made it, you said, a gift to humanity. Now, that's a wonderful way to look at things. And it's too bad more of the world doesn't do that, because, a lot of areas in the ocean that are protected nowadays are not necessarily areas where a lot was going on. You'll find places that have been protected because no one cared about them anyway, to begin with, let's be honest. But Kiribati took an area that was heavily fished and said, well, we're gonna take a break here. We're going to give the ocean a rest. And to me, that's just a morally, ethically wonderful thing to have done. And I thank you, and I thank the country for doing that. And as I said earlier, I feel honored for the parts that I've been able to play in that narrative. But Nabus, you've been the executive director of the PIPA Trust for how many years now?
It's 3 years now.
3 years now. And you've been doing a fantastic job. I'm on the board. I'm one of the trustees, so we have that relationship. The PIPA Trust is a nonprofit organization whose sole purpose is to support the Phoenix Islands Protected Area, which is obviously owned by the people of Kiribati and operated by the government. And one of the things that the trust has been doing under your leadership has been something called Bring PIPA Home. And I wonder if you could tell us about that initiative and why we do it and what it does, and because it's very important what we're up to there, what you're leading that initiative.
Yes, well, Greg, I came in at a time when the government changed.
Yeah,
right. So there was a high risk that the new government would reopen the PIPA, because there wasn't a full understanding on the other side of the parliament, especially in the opposition. I was in the opposition also.
Okay.
And there was a bit of disappointment with the expectations that we would be getting something when out of closing the PIPA.
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened as was expected.
Sure.
These were real perceptions at the time.
Yep.
So it's very interesting because when I came in, that was a big challenge. And I think, Greg, you would remember, because that's when the first day I started, and we had this board meeting and workshop, and you had to go because you were summoned by the cabinet to explain.
I do remember,
a little bit about that. So that was the experience. So the government was, we really had to make sure the government was on board.
Yes.
Especially the new government.
Yes.
So that was a major challenge. So that's one of the reasons why we needed to bring PIPA home. And it starts with the leadership. Of course, that's... So there was a lot of opposition people that are now in the government that needed to be convinced, and they needed to buy into PIPA, because it would have been the previous government's
I think
property rather than theirs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because, PIPA, it's abbreviation for Phoenix Islands Protected Area, got a lot of attention worldwide. The world noticed it. There was awards given. There was accolades laid out on the country and on individuals involved with it. But then you'd find in the country of Kiribati itself, people didn't actually know much about it. And there was a risk of, as you mentioned, when the government changing, of it being, I think, de-gazetted or delisted. So we, the trust, and you, the newly hired executive director, kind of said, okay, our job is to make sure this thing continues. What's the primary risk? Well, we realized the risk now was that the people of the country, the ministers to begin with, didn't know about it. So Bring PIPA Home was an initiative to actually take this marquee project that the world was celebrating and bring it back to the people of Kiribati. And Nabus, as I've told you before, this is kind of one of the holy grails of conservation, is to find out ways that you can sustain and move initiatives into the future with minimal risk.
That's right.
Because a lot of times you'll have an ambitious, wonderful conservation initiative that is executed by the signature of a leader, and then the next leader comes along and says, I'm not so crazy about that, and he changes it. But if the people, and starting with the ministers, are excited and committed to it, it's never going to go away. Because I got to share this with you. We had a politician in the United States here called Tip O'Neill from my own home state of Massachusetts, and he had a famous expression. He was the Speaker of our House, by the way, so he was a very powerful politician. He said, all politics are local. And what he meant by that is you got to get to the people, and you've got to talk to the people, and that's what's political. It doesn't matter what your ideals are. It doesn't matter what kind of speech you can give. As long as you can convince the people that you're representing of an idea, that will carry the day. By the way, we have to sort of remind people, this is a huge country in the Central Pacific by area, but a very small country by population. There's only 120, 130,000 people. And this area that's protected, you can't even get to it. You and I were just there, and it was a lot of gymnastics, hiring private planes and boats to get out there. But the people of the nation have not been able to experience this. So it's really, for them, it's an idea. And how do you take this distant idea and bring it home to the people of the country and make it relevant to them?
Can I, before I answer that question, Greg, can I just say that as a politician for 15 years, and
were you 15 years? I didn't know
for 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
And being working with the people and understanding that when you stand for something, you really need to communicate and make sure that it's relevant to the people. It's always the people. So that politics is about people.
Right.
Right.
And that's where that all politics is local. That's what that means.
That's what it means. So I understood that in order for the people of Kiribati, who are so far away from the PIPA, in order for them to fully understand the values of PIPA, they need to practice it. They need to have an experience of it, and that was a challenge.
Okay.
So it's okay trying to convince the leadership, but in the long term, it's you're right. Yeah, we need to tackle the local people. So what we need to do is to bring that home somehow to the people. And we've had some initiatives, so I want to talk about those things in there.
I'd like you to, and I can't underscore enough how important this is, because for the whole globe, as we get public policy created to save the planet, to save the oceans, which is essentially to save ourselves, we have to come up with ways to make it long-lasting. We have to come up with ways to convince the population of the planet that this is what has to happen, because otherwise, we are going to go down the tubes. I mean, the environment is degrading very rapidly. The ocean's health is on a steep decline. So the methodology here, it's not just an academic exercise, Nabus.
Yep.
This is something that Kiribati, you and the PIPA Trust has pioneered that's really important to understand. So what have you done? You're going to walk through some of the initiatives. Tell me what you've done to take this abstract idea and make it relevant to the people of the nation.
In 2006, around August in 2006, we launched the PIPA Trust Scholarship.
Okay.
Of course, the objective was to provide the capacity, develop the capacity, local capacity. And I think the dream is to maybe eventually we will have over the 10-year period, we would have our own local scientists that would be able to help us manage PIPA in terms of this the development of the science of PIPA. It was also a good gesture to the government that we were bringing some tangible benefit to the country by, for the first time, PIPA Trust is supporting.
So an educational program.
Educational
so
program.
So the first thing that people saw was, okay, we've made this, let's call it was a sacrifice. We've made this gift to the world, which is this gigantic area that we're protecting. And, oh, look at this. We get some educational benefits back from it. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What else has happened?
We realized that we needed to do a bit more, so that not only the government and some people, maybe the educated people might respond to, it's also the people further down. So we thought about some transformation.
Okay.
So we looked at the urban areas. What can we do to transform this place so that we're moving towards the environment that we have in PIPA, which is a pristine environment. So it was about transformation, and that was the second thing that we moved on to. So we call it the Beso transformation. So we targeted one of the
another island, one of the islands. Yeah.
And one of the islands is
where a lot of people, where most people.
Main center is Beso, where we have almost 20,000 people living in an area which is only barely 1.9 square kilometers.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So you're talking about overpopulation, you're talking about overfishing and the stress on the resources and also so it was quite an issue. So we thought that what can we do? We needed to address that because it's about the people issue again.
So I'm fascinated by this Bring PIPA Home initiative, Nabus. And, I'm from the United States. And the way I think about it in some ways is this. We have a national park system in the United States. And as a taxpayer, I support the national park system. Now, there are certain parts of our national park system I've never been to, and probably I'll never go to. Like one example is Yosemite. I hope I do go there one day, but I haven't been there yet. However, my tax dollars go towards paying for the upkeep of Yosemite National Park, and I like that idea. I don't mind it at all. So in some way, there's been this buy-in by me through our political system for the maintenance of the Yosemite National Park. Now, PIPA is similar in some ways. It's a national initiative that's distant, and not only have few people been there, but the likelihood of anybody going there is quite slim because the barriers to getting there are so vast. However, you've managed to come up with a new way of engaging people. I mean, in a sense, yes, some of their tax dollars are paying for it, but it's more than that. It's become, as you said, I think you used the word transformation. So on the one end of the spectrum, you have the Phoenix Islands Protected Area, which is one of the most pristine ocean habitats on the planet. I can testify to that because I've studied it. And then on the other, you mentioned the island of Basio, where you have 20,000 people living in an area smaller than 2 square kilometers. So a highly dense, urban Pacific Island community. And what they're doing is they're looking at this idea. It's really just an idea. They've seen pictures maybe, but it's an idea of this pristine area. And they're an ocean culture, so they have an intrinsic sort of understanding and value for the oceans. And they're trying to transform their world, their urban ocean, if I've got it right, their urban ocean world towards this standard, right? It's PIPA.
Exactly.
Tell me the mechanics of exactly how it works.
It's very interesting because it's about getting everybody together. It's a whole of government, whole of private sector, whole community approach.
Yeah.
And when we got together, we developed what we call the Clean to Green to Blue initiative.
Okay.
I know you might be familiar with the whole domain approach to ocean conservation, which is ridge to reef to ocean.
I've heard that. Yeah, ridge is like the terrestrial mountaintop, and reef is the coral reef. So it's like the mountaintop down to the reef. Yeah.
Well, we had to think of something else.
Right.
And our concept, our model would be the Clean to Green to Blue. And let me explain this. We have to clean up the land.
Okay.
Look after manage the waste. Yeah. And then we've got to do some greening also. Yep. So it's a bit of a home gardening, simple home gardening to take care of the degradable waste.
Yeah.
And then we look after and try to contain the non-degradable waste. Of course, in doing that, you'd be able to have a blue ocean because we are trying to control what goes off from the land to the sea.
Right.
So you've got to deal again with the people and the land before you can deal with the sea. So this is what we have developed. I know it's going to be very challenging, going to be difficult. It'll take time, but I think we're getting there. Yeah.
You are. What you're doing, it sounds to me, is you basically got values and sort of ethics associated with this protected area, the Phoenix Islands, and you're importing those to the local community. So you're raising the standard of environmental health. And I think you're also raising kind of the energy and the emotional level of the people, aren't you? I mean, that's what I feel when I go there.
Yes, you were there in 2017, and you saw the local women. They welcomed you because of what we have done.
Yes.
Yeah? And they even danced to you.
They did. They danced.
When they danced to you, the old women, there was a blessing. It was a blessing, and they appreciated this because, and it's not that difficult for them to appreciate what we're trying to do because. One of the things we did, because it's overpopulated and we have health issues and that, but once we started cleaning up, diarrhea went down for some of the communities.
Is that right?
Very good in cleaning.
Okay.
So they saw it.
So their standard of living has gone up a bit.
Yeah, in terms of health.
Yeah, in terms of health.
Yeah. And you want to continue with this. But it's a lot of waste, though. We have to manage, especially the solid waste. You've got the shipwreck. You've got the scrap metal to look after and all that.
Well, I can't underscore how important it is we find these strategies in our societies globally that we can use to connect people to the natural world and to ensure that we maintain that natural world. And you've done it, sounds practically, with some health benefits to the population. And as I said, I can tell you one time when I went to one of your Bring PIPA Home initiatives, this young girl walked alongside us, and she found out that I was on the PIPA board of the trust. And she said, I am so excited about PIPA. And I said, oh, that's really nice, young lady. I'm glad you're excited about PIPA. And She said, I am really excited about PIPA, she said. And I said, well, that's wonderful. And I said, why are you so excited about PIPA?
Because I am excited.
She said, I don't know, but I'm just really excited. And building that kind of energy is how you change.
Yeah. When you're overwhelmed, Greg, it's very difficult for you to find the words. So you just...
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's how you move society, though, is you move the emotional interest, the energy, and that's when things really do change. Kiribati is showing real leadership in not only creating this vast protected area for the benefit of the planet. And by the way, if anybody listening has ever eaten tuna, chances are you've eaten tuna that came out of the country of Kiribati, because most of the world's tuna comes from the South Pacific, and most of the South Pacific tuna comes from Kiribati waters. So thank you for feeding the world.
Can I say and add to that, Greg, because and they will continue to eat that into the future because we have a natural farm in PIPA.
Yes, you have. Now, that brings me to another point that I wanted to discuss with you. And I think one of the challenges we have today in sustainability and in managing the resources on our planet is vocabulary. And if you say, I'm going to make a protected area, that rings well to some ears. But to other ears, it might ring as restriction, like you're going to stop me from using resources that I perhaps depend on. And I think we need to think about new kinds of vocabulary, like the Phoenix Islands protected area is a protected area, yes, but it's also, as you just pointed out, a fish factory.
That's
and
right.
I like to use the word like fish factory or regeneration zone or rejuvenation zone. Because if you go to a country like Kiribati, and there are other ones in the world that people depend every day on the ocean, and I think you're the one that pointed out to me that most people don't have a refrigerator in Kiribati.
That's right, yeah.
But they've got the ocean. And the ocean is their refrigerator. So when they want to have a fresh piece of fish, they don't go to the freezer. They don't go to the refrigerator. They go out to the ocean and they pull it out of the ocean. And therefore, they're depending on the ocean in a very daily, visceral, nutritional way. And the fact that you can create a link, not a restriction, but a link, a functional link, is I think the best way that we can go forward in the world. Because if you go to a country and you say, hey, you want to create all these restrictions around you for the ocean, they're going to go, well, no way. But if you say, hey, how would you like a fish factory? They're going to go, hey, tell me more about that. Or how would you like a regeneration zone? How would you like more jobs? How would you like more international attention? That's another thing that Kiribati has done, is fulfilled many treaty obligations. The world runs on treaties when it comes to different countries working together. And there's a whole cluster of them that you and I are familiar with that have to do with conservation and have to do with natural resources. And countries sign these treaties, and then they're supposed to achieve the targets in the treaties. The world currently has a target to protect 10% of the ocean by 2020. Currently, we're at about 6%, I believe, maybe 6.5%. And Kiribati has done its part. You've protected 12% of your EEZ. So you're really well on the way to contributing to this global goal. So I'd like to come back to, if you don't mind, this is a little controversial, but this is what's going to be interesting to people, and what's important is climate change. There's two dimensions to climate change. One is mitigation, which is like stopping the action. And I hope most of our listeners are aware that the planet is getting warmer, and it's getting warmer because of the greenhouse gases that we're putting into the atmosphere, along with some other factors. And the other one is adaptation, which is adapting to the change. So ideally, your country wants to have a mitigation strategy, which is to stop the warming, but then an adaptation strategy, which is to sort of deal with the changing climate. Now, Kiribati being so low to the sea level, you said 1 or 2 meters above sea level, depending on the ocean, which is the primary heat sink on the planet, it's the primary driver of our climate. The sea levels are rising. There's no question about that.
That's right.
And how does PIPA fit into this whole discussion about climate change and adaptation and mitigation?
Well, I think PIPA right now is more of an adaptation strategy. You're a scientist, Greg, and you know exactly what's in there. We believe in the corals and everything, and they're surviving. So it's going to offer the world the possibilities for saving the world in the as the water is rising through climate change and that. Those are the things that I think we're offering also to the world. Yeah.
You are. The ocean actually has an immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean it has a way of dealing with change. It has a way of dealing with insults. And a healthy immune system for your body would require your body to be rested and to be in good shape. And it actually is the same with the ocean. If the ocean is rested, that is, if you're not stressing it too much with overfishing or with coastal development or pollution, it enables it to have kind of a healthy immune system to deal with other insults like heating, like sea level rise. And I do agree with you as a scientist that the Phoenix Islands Protected Area is an excellent adaptation strategy. You're giving the ocean and you're giving the nation the best shot at adapting to this rapidly changing environment that we're in. But I can't move off this subject without making a point here, and this is my own personal point, and that is that the world has been on kind of a carbon party for the last 150 years. And most of the benefits of this carbon party, which is burning fossil fuels, has been delivered front and center to the United States, to parts of Asia, to Europe. But the effects of this carbon party, the heating of the planet, the heating of the ocean, the knock-on effects there, and the rising sea levels has been impacting countries that had very little to do with contributing to this carbon party, with burning the fossil fuels. And I feel that there's an obligation that the countries responsible for the problem should be bearing more of the costs of the problems that's been created. So I'm not going to put you on the spot here because I know it's a highly politicized discussion, but I just wish you and the country the best when it comes to dealing with this. And, you know, your works in PIPA and the sea level rise and all that is quite a challenge. But I think that it's looking better because the healthier the ocean is, the better it can adapt to these insults.
Yeah. Can I say this, Greg? Because even though up to now, we're not able to influence the carbon issue and everything, we're still looking into the future, and particularly into opportunities where we would be able to engage in mitigation.
Okay.
And I can say this to you, should there be an opportunity, I'm sure Kiribati will take that opportunity.
Okay. I kind of want to circle back now to kind of almost where we started. Kiribati culture did not have a written language when European contact occurred, which I think was the middle part of the 19th century. However, you have other ways of communicating information. I mean, one way is dance. You referred to dance earlier. A dance will tell a story, right? As has been explained to me, when something happens or there's information that wants to be transferred, the dance will be created around that idea. Is that right?
It's a privilege, and it's a particular skill to dance. Yeah. It's also a particular skill to be able to, to translate, to carry that message from the song, from the lyrics and the music into action. Yeah?
Like if you're trying to recall something, is there a song that comes to mind or a dance that you've seen?
The dance, the song that I would hear would be the most traditional dance. It's more like it's not like singing. It's like it's the old people. It'll be only two people singing, with no music, and it'll be more or less like chanting, but they're like in a controlled manner. It'd be a man and a woman, or even just a single person, and he'll be holding his ear like this, and he'd be more or less meditating and making the sound. Most of the words we don't understand also these days, but you can, when they tell you what it means, it's the stories of the ocean, the stories of families, and stories of problems and our culture and everything.
So these songs, they communicate something, but you're not even sure what the words are, but you get the meaning? Is that what?
Yes, that's right. I'll tell you this story, but it happened particularly on this one particular island in the Bayang.
Yeah.
This is the north of Tarawa. And the old days, many years ago, several years ago, this lady was lost in the sea because of the fighting in their island.
Yep.
Because we had warfare and everything.
Okay.
All the time. And the father put her on the canoe and let her off, and she floated in the current, and she landed in the Bayang. And she stayed in this village called Liporno,
okay,
which is a very special islet in that island. And when she was there, they next day had visitors that came from her original island.
Yeah.
Apparently she was of a chiefly line. But she was in the island like more or less like a servant. But when her family arrived, they didn't really know that she was there because she was a kid. Now she was maybe in her 40s.
Okay.
So they had this, again, we go back to the Banepa.
Yes.
The visitors were welcomed into the village, and there was communication and exchange between the visitors and the local people. And as soon as the visitors had their speeches and that, she responded from behind because there was nothing in the village. And she started singing. And she was telling the story of where she came from.
Oh.
And that's when the village realized that she was the daughter of the chief from the island where the visitors had come from.
Oh, wow.
So that's, yeah.
Now, what does that story tell you? It tells you something about humility, right?
It's humility,
Yeah.
and you wait until the right time.
Okay.
Yeah. It's about perseverance as well.
It teaches those values.
Yes.
I like that a lot. So instead of her prancing around the village saying, hey, I'm from a chiefly, she
right.
just, there was no point in it.
There was no point in it because she didn't have the power.
That's what I'm talking about, is stories like that have a way of communicating, I think, to young people and to continue the transmission of knowledge and ideas and things that are really important. Mm-hmm. Another note, I'll recall the time that you and I were in North Tarawa, and I noticed all the mounds that had been, and it was different. It was like people had been digging all over the place. And tell me that story. That's a good story.
Digging of the...
Looking for
the crab?
No, for the mouse.
For the mouse. This was the princess that came from apparently from Samoa.
Right.
But she didn't come. She was taken by the village people. They had to go to Samoa to get the lady to marry the king of the village.
War, right, that happened between Samoa?
They have a lot of expeditions. But each expedition they failed because they got killed by the Samoans until they got the best team. They sent the best team, and apparently they were successful. They went through all the tests and everything, and they were able to bring back the...
So they captured the princess.
Captured the princess.
Okay, what happened next?
And when she arrived, yes, the king wasn't allowed to see the woman, of course, because it was forbidden, of course.
Right.
Because he had to give her a few days, and then he can touch her, he can see her. So he can see her, he can look at her, but he can't touch her.
Right.
So she would be going to this lake in Buariki, and she would be having bathed in there. And the guy would be peeping, of course, and he wants to jump for the lady, but he couldn't until he couldn't hold on. So he just jumped.
Yeah.
But as soon as he jumped to the lady, she turned into a mouse. And of course, when you're a mouse, you're very small.
Right. And she was a white mouse, right?
So when they chased her among the bush and everything, and then they had to dig also the holes.
Trying to find her.
And as a result, of course, you've been to
yeah, those holes are really the result of people looking for her.
Oh, that's our story.
That's the story. Yeah. That's your story.
I wasn't there.
And you're sticking to it.
I'm sticking to it.
You know, Nabuti, I used to think indigenous knowledge was really important. I've never doubted that. But I always thought it was kind of quaint and like it belonged in a museum. But I've since learned that it's not quaint. It's actually important, and that we have a lot to learn from it. A couple of stories you've told here, they transmit principles and knowledge that are really important. And I want to touch on something else about your culture. It's technically, in anthropological terms, it's called a renunciative society. And I didn't know that until I talked to an anthropology friend of mine, and I said, what's that mean? And he said, oh, it's really simple, Greg. It means that people in the culture of Kiribati and many Pacific Island countries, they renounce their belongings to the community, to the betterment of the community. And I said, oh, you mean they give stuff away? And he said, no, it's not giving stuff away. You never owned it to begin with. And I said, okay, tell me more. And he said, well, it's a way to balance the resources. It means you're never going to go take too much fish out of the ocean because you're not going to amass a big fortune. There's no point. But you will take enough to give it away to those people that need it. And I realized, boy, what a fantastic principle, because it encourages sustainability. It encourages, sort of social equity within the community. And wouldn't it be something if we had UN treaties that had renunciative principles built into them?
I think that'd be a great idea. That'd be a great idea. It's all about global citizenship, and we were. It's always been ours. That's how
Exactly.
we felt. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you'd see it more into the north as you go to the northern part of Kiribati, where some of the islands they go to extremes. Like you'd be cooking your food, and you cook your food in the big pot.
Yeah.
You'd be cooking maybe tuna, so you're boiling it, and the people in your neighbors, all your neighbors, they can come. It's okay for them. They can come and take the juice. You can eat the flesh, but they'll also
really?
get
So
something from you.
so they have the right to come and have the juice.
Well, it's okay.
It's okay.
It's not like you force yourself.
Right.
But it's like it's acceptable.
Yeah, it's acceptable.
Please,
yeah.
you come. There's plenty of food. So when I cook, I don't just cook for myself.
Yeah.
I also cook for my community as well. Yeah. Of course, I'll have the best.
Yeah.
But they can also share. When they catch fish, then I can also help myself to the food.
That's what I'm talking about. If we had principles like that built into international relationships, instead of countries that don't need it amassing food, amassing metals, amassing oil, amassing whatever the product is, I'm not talking about global communism or anything, I'm just talking about getting it right. Because things are not right the way the world currently operates. We need to figure this out. And the other part about indigenous knowledge, and I would call it indigenous science, is the understanding that you and your ancestors have gotten about the ocean from living alongside it these many thousands of years. I'm a scientist. I'm a modern, Western scientist, let's say. But I've gone to the village in Bariki, in North Tarawa, and, I've learned from the people there some things about goatfish I never knew.
Right.
Because who better to learn about animals than the people that have been living with them, side by side. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Are there any natural history tidbits you could share with me about Kiribati knowledge, whether it's from marine mammals, dolphins, or fish, or crabs? Or is there anything in your growing
Let's
up?
talk about a shark.
Shark.
The shark. Right, let's talk about a shark. A shark we treat it as a human being also.
Oh.
Even though we eat it sometimes.
Okay.
It's we don't use it all the time, but when we do need it for when it's needed, then we go fishing. The way we catch it is also with respect, because you're calling him or her. And when you kill it, there's also a particular way of killing it. You can't kill it with a metal, any metallic stuff. It's got to be a club, wooden club.
Wow.
So and it's also you've also got to hit it, particularly in the area where she or he likes to be hit.
Wow.
Okay, now when you catch that, and when you bring it to the land, it's got to be also respected. So it'll be taken. There'll be a mat laid, and he'll be laid or she be laid, facing the east, like a dead man or dead woman. You can't do the guttering first until you've given.
And this is just sharks.
This is shark.
Do you have any idea why sharks are treated differently than grouper?
Because in our legend, there were two men who once lived in Buariki.
Okay.
Yeah, and there was one of them was the person that eventually became a shark. Yeah.
Okay.
He went away because they were trying to outwit each other during competing for when they go fishing.
So there's
the shark was the shark man was the tricky guy. Whenever the other guy went fishing, he would go into the water and snap the bait so that the guy doesn't catch fish.
Oh, so this story is about, so you don't want to risk the possibility of killing this guy.
No.
Or somebody else that maybe turned into a shark.
The story was that there were two men.
Yeah.
But one of them used to turn himself into a shark to play tricks on the other guy once he goes fishing.
Okay.
So that he comes back, doesn't catch any fish.
All right.
So one day the other guy realized, it must be this guy. So he prepared next time we went fishing.
Okay.
So he caught him and he hit him. We didn't kill him, but when he came back, and the guy never said anything, and he didn't come out of the house because apparently he had a lump on his forehead.
Oh, from when he was, because he was hit when he was a shark.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And that's when they departed. The shark couldn't stay because he knew that eventually he'd be killed. So he went into the ocean.
Okay.
And stayed there. So, but eventually there was an intermarriage.
Okay.
Between the descendants of the guy who stayed on the land and the shark.
Okay. All right.
So
that's so cool.
Yeah.
I heard also from a Kiribati friend once that there's a belief that every person has a corresponding animal in the ocean that looks like
that'd
them.
be the dolphin.
The dolphin.
The dolphin. That'll be the dolphin. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's a dolphin swimming around out there that looks like you, kind of.
Yeah. This is what happens. They sometimes they have also particular seasons or special times in the year. This would be particularly in the northern part of Kiribati, where the Minister of Environment also is from.
Alexander. Yeah.
There'll be a family. There'll be somebody with a skill, and is able to call the dolphins
I've heard
onto
about
land.
this. Yeah.
Or maybe a major function. And he would go to sleep, and they'll put all the mats on top of him, and he'd be going. Apparently, he would be going and leading the school of dolphins onto the land, and the people will go and meet them and greet them, and you'd be looking for somebody the dolphin that's your match, that looks like you. So like your dolphin, and you're his man or his woman, and you'll take that onto the land.
To me, Nabus, that says we are connected to the ocean.
That's right. Yeah.
Which we are. Mm-hmm. The humanity is connected to the ocean. We depend upon the ocean. Now, there's a story that reinforces that idea within the minds of young people that hear it, within the minds of adults that hear it. And that's the importance to me of that story is that the ocean's important. We're connected to it. We have to take care of it. Yeah. And that gets back to this idea that we need to start to illustrate and emphasize and import this kind of knowledge into global affairs more. There's just to throw out another example. This isn't a Kiribati example, but it's an American Indian example, which is the Iroquois Nation has a constitution that they developed prior to any contact with Europeans. And within that, they have something called a 7-generational rule, which any decision the elders in the tribe make has to be good for 7 generations to come. And what a great idea that is, huh? I mean, for example, if a logging company came in and said, hey, we want to cut down all your trees, and you're going to get a big fat check this year, but you're not going to have trees for another 100 years, the tribal leaders would not allow that because it would be good for them, but it's not going to be good for their children or their grandchildren or go 7 generations into the future. Imagine if we had those kind of principles built into our political system instead of short-term, 3-year or 1-term kind of time frames.
No, but it'd certainly be interesting to see what might happen. I mean, it's something we continue to hope for.
Now, Bus, I want to thank you so much for your time and for all that you've shared with me and our listeners. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? And by the way, this won't be your last time. I'm going to have you on the show every time you're in town. But is there anything else that you wanted to mention now? Or
I just wanted to go back to the Bring PIPA Home initiative, and one of the things that we also done is creating the mini PIPAs throughout the Kiribati. Yeah.
Yes,
and we've done that. So we've got a few islands that's setting up there. And some of the islands is the closure of the whole fishing in the reef, and that it's just the targeting particular areas where they can have it like for spawning grounds, so that they can have more fish to eat.
Fish factories.
The fish factories, small mini PIPA factories.
You're right. So that there's been the creation of small fish factories.
Yes.
Which are they called PIPA?
They will have their different names.
Yeah. But it's part of.
But the PIPA will be engaged and partnering also with the government.
Okay.
That is, in some areas it will be like the Ministry of Fisheries initiative, like the community-based fisheries management.
Yeah.
But of course, PIPA will be there too.
Okay.
and then supporting that activity. One of the things that comes to mind also is learning from the PIPA model in terms of the sustainable financing mechanism.
Yeah.
That's one of the areas where we could look at in terms of sustaining what we're trying to do in bringing PIPA home. So what do we do for the urban areas? Should we have also a funding mechanism that is sustainable into the future? And likewise also in the Outer Islands where, because
in other words, conservation, sustainable development. I like to use the word regenerative development. It's complicated.
Yeah.
We have a lot of things to think about: financing, policy, public education, science, and they're all kind of bundled together and are important in terms of moving forward in the world. And the PIPA Trust, the Phoenix Islands Protected Area Trust, under your leadership, has been grappling with all this spectacularly well. And I want to, thank you for all that you've done in that regard.
Well, can I say this? It's not just me, Greg. It's really the passion.
Yeah,
it's the passion, and you don't have the passion when you don't have the belief. So, and I believe in this, and it's partnering with everybody else in like people-to-people communication, and having them also experience what you're experiencing. That I think would make a difference.
Yeah. No, you're very humble, and thank you for acknowledging everybody else. But this is your full-time job, and I appreciate all that you do in that regard. And please come back to LA a lot, and we'll find more opportunities to get the word out.
Well, you can count on that. I will.
Okay.
Definitely.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
And thank you too.
You betcha.